Not to bang this around too much or to bang your brains around too much with highfalutin philosophical stuff. I hope you will not mind that my sermon today, while based on and inspired by the Serenity prayer, is not in any way really a Christian sermon. Serenity, courage, wisdom. But I'm not going to talk about the Protestant theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, who put this together in the 30s, and I'm not even going to get into the long version of it. I'm only going to go what was in the song. Wouldn't it be great if things always went your way? I had one really neat thing. My sweetie came down from Maryland to stay with me, and she loves I Dream of Jeannie, so we went to Cocoa Beach. The notion that she could just blink and whatever she wanted to would happen, she's just enthralled by that. I wouldn't mind that either. Now, we don't always get what we want, and there was even a Twilight Zone about a gambler who found himself in this place where he always won. And he said, "This is so great, I'm in heaven." But then he got tired of it. It turns out he was in hell. There was no risk, there's no gamble, there's no thrill. That was his hell. But for me, I wouldn't mind a little bit of get things the way you want them, a little more than I get them. I am somebody who isn't always patient. That will shock those of you who know me. I am somebody who has opinions about things. I am somebody who doesn't always easily accommodate myself to the speed at which some people do things. I drive a Miata. What kind of person would drive a Miata? Would it be somebody who's like, "I want the safest thing there is so I can drive very slowly"? It's not a muscle car, but I do like to drive. I like to move around and that sort of thing. So one of the things that I ought to be ashamed of, except I'm a shameless person, is the stuff that comes out of my mouth when I'm addressing the drivers in front of me who seem unable to hear me for some reason. My father had a way of characterizing other drivers, and I think it's absolutely accurate. Anyone driving slower than me is an impediment to traffic, and anyone driving faster is a damn fool. So there's a lot of impediment. I will be there in traffic, and I will scream at this like my life depends on it. And if you saw me do that, you would say, "I'm crazy." Literally crazy. And I believe I do. I believe I get literally crazy. In whatever sense you want to use it, when I'm having an experience like that. What is going on? Often the extent of my irrational, crazy anger behind it is, "Mark, you could have left 5 minutes earlier." What's easier to change, your departure time or the behavior of other drivers? Right? So for me, a baby step in a movement toward being a wholer, wiser, better person, to blessing instead of cursing, would be for me to at least just accept that they're driving the way they're driving. Let it be, right? So the serenity of the Serenity prayer is an important part of what I work on in my life, because I'm not quite as wired for that speed of serenity as some other people might be. Now, not only is that the problem that sets up the first part of it, so I say, whether I'm addressing God or a higher power or my better self, whatever it is, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change. It sounds profound, and it is profound, but if you think about the pieces of it, it's obvious, isn't it? Why would you change something you can't change? Unless you're the man of La Mancha, then I give you a free pass. You gotta dream the undreamable dream and do all those unthings that the man of La Mancha can do. But if you're not the man of La Mancha, it's completely obvious to any sane person that you can't change what you can't change. Okay? So, sometimes we get caught up in these things. I get caught up in these things. And does it benefit the world in any way that I screamed at that driver? No. Does it benefit me in any way? No. I make myself worse by getting caught up in that attitude. My being in the world is poisoned by that. in a way that is of absolutely no good. Where does it come from? It comes from me having expectations. And when I break it down, I can see how unreasonable those expectations are. Do you really think you're going to drive from here to there and not encounter any other drivers if, say, you're going through Avondale at dinner time? Or, if you're going, do you really think that every driver that's out there is going to be going what you consider an appropriate speed? Of course not. So any reasonable person would acknowledge that. But think about bigger things in lives, too. I have this pain that won't go away. Someone that's dear to me died. A pet is very sick. All the things in life that we worry over, the things in life that we get upset about, the things we would like to have be different. Did you ever think you could get through life, at least very far through life, without having some of that stuff happen? Did you really expect it was never going to hurt? Did you really think you were never going to lose a friend or something else or someone else? That's the way life is. So in a way, the serenity I'm speaking to this morning is the serenity that the Buddhist seeks. Because the first noble truth is that life is suffering. And the cause of that suffering that the brilliant psychologist Buddha broke down, that a religion's been built on, is that the cause of suffering is attachment. We expect, we desire, we want, and when it doesn't go that way, we hurt. That's what makes us sad, grieving, in pain ourselves in different ways. Now that's natural, it's human nature. It is in fact the human condition as Buddha sees it. And so the brilliant psychologist Buddha develops a whole eightfold path for how we can overcome the kinds of attachments that make our lives intrinsically full of suffering like that. So for me, the more I can let go of the other driver's behavior and other things I cannot change, then the more at peace I am with my world, my life, myself, my spiritual whatever. Part of it is to be able to just let it be. Let me give you another example besides the example of me driving in the car. You come to the door, and the door you think is the entrance, but it's locked. It won't open. And then you see there's a sign right next to it that says, entrance this way, and it has an arrow. But you're like me. Why does this door not open? It goes to the same place. Why could this not be a functional door? They should have made this door work. Can't they just have somebody that could open this door when somebody's here? They could put a bell in. Now I could go through. I could do this for an hour. You don't want me to, but I really could. I could get into that. I could relate to the moral indignation that might rise up in me when I came to a door that didn't open. But we don't think you were nuts if you did that. Just follow the sign. It says it works over there, right? Version number 2. Same setup, but there's no sign. You come to a place, you think this is the entrance, you try the door, it doesn't open, you even knock and nobody... What could you do? What could you possibly do? You're trying to get in, the door won't open. Oh no. I don't know what to do. Would any of you have an idea? Look for another door, right? Walk around the building and, oh, here's the entrance, right? Not hard to do. So if you're not completely attached to this is the entrance, it takes very little imagination, very little curiosity, very little wherewithal of any kind to circumambulate the building if you have to, but just find where the door is, right? Third variation. Every time I've come here before, This door has been the entrance. Ever run into anything like that? It's not like it used to be when I was your age. That's attachment. That's how we set ourselves up, because we're expecting it to be like it was, and there's this thing called change that sometimes happens in the natural and social worlds even. So we get stuck. We have to deal with that attachment that we've got and to overcome that. So the Serenity prayer helps me enter into an attitude of letting go. It helps me to bless and not to curse. It helps me get on with my life in those respects. Serenity, if you think about the word, is not the same as placidity. It's not a complete stillness. But to be serene is to be at peace. So in a way, what the Serenity prayer is saying, when I come upon something even unpleasant, even at odds with what I expected, even at odds with what's important to me, if I can't change it, let me make peace with that reality. Let me make peace with it. And the opposite of making peace with it is fighting it, right? That's exactly what I'm doing with the driver. Using my non-existent telepathic powers and my very loud, inappropriate voice to try to influence their behavior. And so instead of fighting it, if it's a reality that can't be changed by me, then I accept and make peace with it. And that would radically transform my life if I could do that consistently, wouldn't it? Okay? But that does not mean that I should always give up. And it does not mean that I should listen to the so-called realists who tell me what I can and can't do. So that if I'm engaged in some civic action that some wise person who's been there says can't possibly work because it's been tried before, I don't need to take their word for what will or won't work. I can consider, well, maybe there's another door to this building. Maybe if City Hall can't do that, the fire chief can change this one little thing and that will, whatever. So I want to say that it's very important when we're invoking anything like the Serenity prayer, not to think that it means resignation. Serenity is not despair. It's not, oh, it's never going to be any different from this. No, it might yet be different, but I'm not going to make it different by acting like I'm in charge of it, okay? So if there's a part of it I can't change, move on. No limit. I know ahead of time to what I might change. Now grant me the courage to change what I can. The word courage is interesting to me here because if I were just making up a Serenity invocation for myself, what I need to change what I can change would seem to be something like resolve or will. Something like, why courage? What does courage or bravery have to do with making change? And as I reflect on that, it seems to me one thing it has to do with it is that change is always, at some level, to some extent, a venture into the unknown. How's it going to work if I do it differently? How am I going to feel if I do it differently? How will others react? Will there be some consequence for me that's completely unintended, or for somebody else? I don't know all these things for sure. So the more intent I am on managing my world, the more, if you will, the more anal retentive I am, the riskier change is going to seem. And that might take courage. A second reason that courage seems very apt here is that often it's the harder choice that we're called to make in the way of change. When your son got involved with NAAA, there was a problem that he was dealing with. And he might have reached a point, as many people do, where it's like, I can't do this anymore. The so-called hitting bottom. But there are all sorts of variations on the paths people take. But the point is, for the alcoholic or the addict to choose an ongoing pattern and life of sobriety is a really hard thing. Because among other things, for most addicts and most alcoholics, there is a physiological dependency on that drug. The way their neurotransmitters work is different from those of us who are not that way. And so it's a little different. Let me contrast something with that. My sister used to smoke. She's a therapist. She went to a hypnotist. She went through a short course of hypnotherapy. And then she said, well, why would I want to smoke? I'm not a smoker. The way the hypnosis worked was that it changed her self-definition. So instead of I'm a smoker, now I'm not a smoker. So why would I want to smoke? I don't think you could do that in quite the same way with an alcoholic. I don't think, maybe a Jedi Knight could do this, but I don't think you could just hypnotize someone to think, I'm not an alcoholic, and have them not have any problem with it. And here's why. An alcoholic is not somebody who drinks too much. Lots of people drink too much. Some, especially college kids, they drink all the time. An alcoholic is somebody who cannot control their drinking. So if you're hypnotized to think, I'm not an alcoholic, then I can control my drinking, right? So then I'm going to drink, and then what's going to happen? Unless that was some really strong, I dream of genie hypnotist, okay? Chances are that's really going to get you in trouble because you thought you could control it. So what happens in AA is they don't say, after a certain period of time, well, I've been in recovery this long, let's see, 5 more minutes and I'm recovered. You're never recovered. It's never, I got this. It's always, I am in recovery. Now, the reason I'm going into a slight amount of detail about that, I think that many of us have things like that in our lives. Even if it's not an addiction, even if it's not a diagnosable post-traumatic stress, many of us have been scarred, battered, worn down in different ways. We haven't all, as Jack and I have, had these smooth careers that were straight up to the top. So, one of the effects of that is that it beats you down. I might say, I have tried, but I've also been tried. And there's only a slight difference between tried and tired. Only a little difference there. I've been a change agent, and change agents are not uniformly welcomed within institutions. And so I think all of us in different ways have aspects of ourselves where we're a little more vulnerable than we'd like to be, where we have to put up some extra walls, where we are waiting a little more before we would hazard a chance. We maybe lack a little bit of courage we might otherwise have. We might blow up at certain triggers that others might have a little more serenity for. I want to take a third example that's more real world than my first two. When the pandemic hit, it affected me because I'm an idealist. And it was almost like an affront to my worldview. It was almost like, really? Really? This is the way it's going to be? How am I going to get down with my book where I'm talking about get through these kind of conflicts in a world like this? Add to that everything else with race and add, the politics. We had a good 2020, didn't we? So there's the pandemic, and how do I deal with that? It was pretty easy for me to choose. Well, let's see, why don't I stay socially distanced from people, wear a mask, and take a vaccine when it becomes available? That doesn't sound weird. Okay, I'll do that. The thing that got to me is I live in a world with other people, and they make their own choices. So when I go back out of my house and I see the way other people are acting, there was a hashtag, I think, for a while, around summer of 2020, that was Florida Moron. Oh, you can go back out now. Yeah, I'm only 20. I don't get this stuff. Say, where do you live? I live with my grandparents. So when I saw how other people were responding to that, I couldn't let go of that. It was very hard for me to let the reality be what it was when I couldn't change the minds of all those individual or collective people. I had to kind of accommodate the fact that I'm living in a world that includes not just drivers who drive differently, but people who spread potentially fatal viruses. The attack on the Catholic, go on and on and those things. So where does that take me with the balance of courage and serenity? With the difference between what I can and can't change. 2 songs. I won't quote the whole of the first song, because some of you have at least heard of this. When I find myself in times of trouble, let it be. That song, Let It Be, is a beautiful spiritual articulation of the attitude of acceptance, of the serenity of accepting what I cannot change. And I want to, in terms of the example I gave of the pandemic, call your attention to my favorite second verse. And when the broken-hearted people living in the world agree, there will be an answer, let it be. For though they may be parted, there is still a chance that they may see. There will be an answer, let it be. So in that song, let it be isn't like half of an equation. It's words of wisdom, let it be. There will come an answer, let it be. But there's a different attitude to life that the second part of that, the courage to change what I can change. There's a fantastic movie, if you haven't seen it, try to find it, from around 1970 called The Harder They Come. It's about a reggae singer in Jamaica and encountering institutional stuff. Jimmy Cliff is the star. One of the songs from that is called You Can Get It If You Really Want. You can get it if you really want. You can get it if you really want, but you must try. Try, try, try. You'll succeed at last. Look here. Persecution you must bear. Win or lose, you gotta get your share. Get your mind set on, got your mind set on a dream, you can get it, though harder they seem now. Rome was not built in a day. Opposition will come your way. But the hotter the battle you see, it's the sweeter the victory now. So, for serenity, let it be. For courage, you can get it if you really want. But we know from the Tao Te Ching that if yielding is yin, if one of the sides of nature, of human nature, of ourselves, of the wholeness that constitutes wisdom, if one side of that is acceptance and yielding, and the other side is an active principle, each has the seed of the other within it. Are you familiar with that symbol? There's a light spot within the dark and a dark spot within the light. So I have to give you a third song, just kind of the title. You can't always get what you want. Anybody ever see The Big Chill? There's a scene near the opening of that. There's a funeral, a memorial service. They start playing the organ. You think it's some churchy thing, and it's a rendition. You can't always get what you want. The Rolling Stones are probably the world's principal spiritual advisors. Keith Richards is considered for sainthood upon his impending death. We always think it's impending. He never died. You can't always get what you want, but if you try, sometimes you get what you need. So that's a very practical kind of down-to-earth Taoist synthesis. It's not too PhD to quote the Rolling Stones, right? That's part of what's involved in that. Imagine a person who is buyer man. Everything has a price that I've got enough money to pay. They come to your house as a guest, and they say, ooh, I love that. How much you want for it? You say, well, actually, that's not for sale. It's my grandfather's ashes. Give you $1,000. Well, no, maybe you didn't understand. $10,000. What do you want? At some point, I might even say, God, I got up to $50,000. I'll take it. My granddad would have loved this. I've succumbed to the monetary temptation because money man thinks he can buy anything. Similarly, there are maker men out there that think they can make anything. You have a problem? They're not going to give you empathy, but they'll give you a way to fix your problem. They can fix anything or think they can, and everything they do is try to fix and make things better, because that's how they are in the world. What I want to suggest is that even though they can really help people in a lot of ways, there's something in common with money men. Is they're dictating everything. They're in charge. There's no yin with their yang. There's no letting be. And so they're incomplete and unbalanced as people, and imbalancing the lives in many cases of those around them. I had a different challenge with this balance. My father, at the age of 89, decided that he was going to stop eating and drinking. And so I drove up to Maryland to be with him through his final days. My father described himself as a non-practicing agnostic. He had loved life. He'd done great things, and he just couldn't live when he couldn't do anything, and there were all kinds of other considerations involved in that. My dad, the engineer, was an existentialist. He didn't know it, but he was an existentialist in that respect. Meanwhile, UU Mark, who got into all this Eastern philosophy in high school, and is a spiritualist and tripped out on Edgar Casey and stuff, looks at this and says, well, spirit is eternal. Spirit is the basis of everything. It's a transition into the next whatever. So my father is dying with an urgency and a mortality that existential philosophers think is the very essence of our facing the truth of the human condition. While his philosophy overtrained son, who loves the existentialist, drifted along in a kind of Maharishi form. So the challenge to me with that was a little less serenity and a little more courage. A little less drift and a little more intentional change. So I would suggest that each of us has a balance in our lives that we're reaching for. And that the wisdom to know the difference between what I can change and not change is not what Aristotle called theoretical wisdom. It's what he called practical wisdom. It's the wisdom of life. I got lots of the theoretical stuff. But what I work on in my life is that real world balancing of the yielding and the acting. So that whatever seems meaningful and coherent and whole and beautiful and worthwhile in my life, I can move that farther along and not just sit there looking at what's already there. So what I hope for all of us is that as we move forward from today through the wisdom of our lives, that we can each be a little more open to whatever that balance might be and a little braver in the changes that we do want to make for the wisdom and the wholeness of our truth, our lives, our community. Thank you very much.